Could our planet ever be cracked open by an earthquake? An interesting question came up in a discussion about earthquakes recently, namely, could one ever be powerful enough to fracture the planet, or even completely break it apart? This is a surprisingly difficult question to answer, but let's take a look at the science to see how possible this type of apocalypse really is. First off, let's just remind ourselves what causes an earthquake and just how ludicrously energetic they are at their worst. There are so many different ways to get earthquakes. Even the moon's gravity, the gravitational pull, can trigger them. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll stick to the most common for now. You've got fault networks like the San Andreas complex, which has formed at the point where the Pacific plate is moving northward with respect to the North American plate. This type of tectonic margin is called a transform boundary, and it tends to produce very shallow and damaging earthquakes. Then you've got two plates coming together to collide. On these convergent boundaries, one of two things happens. Either the denser plate sinks beneath the other one and gets destroyed in the mantle, for example, what's happening in the Japan Trench, or they both smash into each other and rise up to form a mountain range, as in the example of the Himalayas. In the case of the former, you get deep-seated earthquakes, and in terms of the latter, you're at middling to shallow depths. And with some exceptions, these are how earthquakes are generated on Earth. So how powerful can they get? Here are the top 5 most powerful earthquakes on record in ascending order. 5. Kamchatka, former Soviet Union, 9 magnitude earthquake, November 4, 1952. On a convergent fault along the Kirill-Kamchatka Trench, it created a devastating tsunami. Over 2,300 people perished. And 4, the Tohoku region, that's the, as we know, it's the Fukushima, the eastern coast of Japan, 9.1 magnitude, March 11, 2011, on a convergent fault along the West Pacific boundary between North American plate and Pacific plates. The tsunami was one of the deadliest in human history. Number 3, Sumatra, Indonesia, 9.2 magnitude earthquake, December 26, 2004, on a convergent fault where the Indian plate slides beneath the Burma plate. A scary fact, at one point the rupture was moving 2.8 kilometers per second, which equates to the speed of 10,000 kilometers or 6,200 miles per hour. Number 2, Prince William Sound, Alaska, 9.2 magnitude, March 27, 1964, on a convergent fault along the Aleutian Trench. And there was a powerful tsunami. Number 1, Valdivia, Chile, 9.5 magnitude, May 22, 1960, 9.5, on a convergent fault between the descending Nazca plate and the South American plate. It also produced a colossal Pacific Ocean-wide tsunami. So how powerful are these beasts? Most of us are familiar with the Richter scale, which is what we call magnitude, which measures earthquakes in terms of amplitude or length of one wave cycle. The higher the amplitude, the more powerful the earthquake. This scale, now defunct, was replaced by another one in the 1970s called the moment magnitude scale, MMS, whose values align similarly with the original. It's a logarithmic scale, meaning that a 2.0 magnitude quake is 32 times the scale of an energetic as 1 magnitude event. Similarly, a 3 magnitude quake is 1,000 times more powerful than a 1 magnitude event. Seismologists can use the seismic waves unleashed by these earthquakes to work out how many joules of energy they release. For a point of comparison, an apple falling a meter to the ground, it's like about 3 feet to the ground, from a tree, involves 1 single joule of energy. The Valdivia quake then released 3.8 quintillion joules of energy in mere seconds, and this was around 42 times more powerful than the most explosive nuclear weapon ever detonated, the Tsar Bomba. So make no mistake, these quakes are very intensely, insanely powerful. Some of you may have spotted the pattern here. All of these quakes took place on convergent plate boundaries. They're what are known as Megathrust earthquakes, which described one fault sliding upward relative to another one on a gargantuan scale. And forget the fabled big one due to rock San Andreas sometime soon. Megathrusts are where the planet is at its most destructive. Now, to say that these 5 quakes were devastating is a massive understatement. The release of so much energy triggered enormous landslides, turned the soil into fast-flowing fluid. The cities were literally washed away. They were even powerful enough to ever so slightly change the length of the day, because causing the planet to wobble, that's what happened. It wobbled on its axis. It is safe to say that even these megathrust monsters could not literally crack open the crust, though, and as far as the geologists can tell, this never happened in the entire history of the world. But why? Well, first of all, the crust is already cracked open. There's average thicknesses of the continental crust about 35 kilometers, 22 miles, compared to the oceanic crust thickness, which is of around 9 kilometers or only 5.6 miles. Fault networks are often shallower than 80 kilometers or 50 miles deep, and they can go as deep as 600 kilometers or 375 miles deep. The crust, the upper mantle beneath it, and the tectonic slabs subducting into it are all cracked in the same way. The majority of mantle, though, cannot be cracked open. It's solid, sure, but it's so hot and squashed together that any attempt to split it would be like putting a dent in a highly pressurized tube of toothpaste. Instantly, mantle material would rush out and to fill the gap in the shock, and the shock would be absorbed. But that is no fun. Surely we can generate an artificial earthquake and tear the planet apart, and you may wonder, why yes, we could. So let's take a look at the energy that would be required to do this. Earthquakes create frictional heat, particularly megathrusts, assuming the crust is generally made of granite, which melts at 1,260 degrees Celsius or 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. We can use the magic of physics to work out how much frictional heat would be required to obliterate the crust during a megaquake. That's 4.4 times 1,023 joules, in fact. That would require an earthquake 53,000 times more powerful than that of the 1960 Valdivia earthquake. That is, it would have to be a 12.8 magnitude earthquake, actually. 12.8 magnitude. If a super villain made this, it would cause Earth's orbit around the Sun to wobble dramatically, perhaps measure up to seasonal changes cycles forever. The molten crust would explode into the ocean, causing a gigantic steam blast that would obliterate whatever country it was near at the time. Unfortunately, this type of megathrust quake could never happen in real time, or we should say fortunately. The forces required to generate it are far beyond the mechanical strength of any rock we know of, which means that the stresses of 2 plates would cause them to jet forward long before they could build up energy. Now, if you really wanted to crack open the planet, we suggest hitting it with an asteroid. That famous dino killer monster was enough to crack open the crust as far north as Colorado. This is by IFL Science, and it's on Bended Reality. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.